The sun is out, there's not a cloud in the sky, and up and down the country, mills are opening once again for National Mills Weekend 2024. Coming up, we're at Oldland Windmill.
You've got chisels, you've got a blacksmith, and you've got some wood. How do you make something that is essentially a factory?
John Henderson is at Oldland Mill to talk to the volunteers.
Welcome to Oldland Windmill.
The sales return to Nutley. So we're down at Lowfield Heath, where today the volunteers are getting the mill ready for the coming season. All this and more on National Mills Weekend 2024. But first, let's have a word with Mildew Cookson, Chair of the SPAB Mills Section.
Welcome everybody to the National Mills Weekend 2024. The SPAB has been protecting mills since 1931 and still does it today. Even though we're doing it, we're having an upheaval battle at the moment with councils cutting back on funding. Quite a few mills are at risk at the moment, all the more reason why we've got to keep an eye on them. This year we're celebrating the volunteers at the mill, and without them, a lot of mills wouldn't be able to open. So it's really good that we've got so many volunteers promoting the mills to the public for us. Well, I mean, all I can say is let's all have a very good weekend and let us know how you fared. I think we've done a poster for you to send your reactions to and see how well we've done, so we can improve it next year if need be. And yeah, few new mills opened that haven't been opened before, so enjoy the weekend.
It's a worrying time for mills at the moment. In Kent, the council is looking to sell off its 8 mills. In Hampshire, Oldland Windmill is mothballed, and according to the BBC website, Sarhol Watermill in Birmingham is possibly going to be sold by the county council. And this is the mill that inspired J.R.R. Tolkien in his writing The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So what is the state of mills in the UK in 2024?
So I'm John Cook. I'm the owner and miller at Foster's Mill at Swaffham Prior, which is near Cambridge. So I'm always struck that the whole market for traditionally milled flour has changed unrecognisably, I think, in the 26 years that I've been milling, to something which has become a huge amount more mainstream. So on the one hand, we have this really positive story. Of course, those mills who are producing flour, I'm very mindful that far from all mills are either both core mills and secondly in a state to work. But for those mills who are able to produce, if one is able to tap into the market that is out there and have good knowledge of product, there is a market there without doubt. We service that. Yet also at the same time, as you've mentioned in your introduction, in terms of the realities of gaining support from our public purse through city councils or indeed county councils, we're in a very different place.
Hi, my name's Jamie Duff and I'm the Heritage Development Officer at Greens Windmill. A few years ago, we had a study done on the mill and it wasn't a favourable outcome. There was quite a few things that were wrong with it, mainly rot in many of the beams of the cap frame. And the result eventually, and it was kind of done in stages. So to begin with, we couldn't turn the cap. We could only mill if the wind was blowing from the south. And eventually then the sails had to be removed altogether. And more studies were done, as these things are. And it was discovered that the mill needed a lot of work.
If we go back to the 20s, 30s, 40s, when organisations like the Mills section of the SPAB were formed, it was about protecting a dwindling heritage. And thankfully, a number of our county and city councils stepped in to save buildings that were at risk of demolition.
Nicholas Whedon, and I'm the vice chair.
Where does the funding come from?
For the windmill building itself, that's all from Lambeth Council. But we also sort of contribute to that. For instance, with the actual milling, we finance all the hygiene PPE, and in fact we're kitting the milling floor out now with a couple of new workbenches, which were funded by fundraising through the Friends. And then the Friends are entirely responsible for the financing and maintenance of the education building.
They do what they can, and the museum service there are very good supporters of the mill. But as with so many things over the last years, money has become really tight and funding has become really tight. And what it's meant really specifically for our mill is maintenance that should have got done hasn't. And we do what we can, and our volunteers do what we can. But that can only go so far.
My name's Dan Taylor. I'm the general manager of a portfolio of properties for the National Trust here in Cumbria. When we had the pandemic came along, that was a real existential moment for the National Trust. As you can imagine, as a visitor business and charity, with 6 million members, part of the reason we survive is because lots of people visit us, and during the pandemic, obviously, no one was allowed to. So we had to shut our doors, and we were really worried about the future of the charity and all these properties that we're looking after for everyone forever. So lots of difficult decisions were made. One of them was to close the watermill. So we had to make some cuts there. And one of the kind of silver linings of the pandemic is that the National Trust volunteers, who were some of the heroes who we had working to kind of operate the watermill, then said, look, okay, why don't we set up a small little charity, take a lease off you, the trust, and operate the building ourselves?
I'm Bob Price. I was the chairman of the Acorn Bank Watermill Trust. When it came to lockdown, I had already been here for 13 years, something like that. And other people have been there for 5, 6, 7 years. And people didn't want to see all the work they put into it go to waste. So when the National Trust decided not to run it, we said, well, can we lease it and keep it going?
Does the National Trust provide any financial help or any other assistance to you?
The National Trust still owns the mill, and they are responsible for the buildings. So if we need to do any repairs to the buildings, we usually do them ourselves, but we bill the National Trust for them. We are responsible for the machinery. The other thing we have managed to negotiate is that there was a legacy left to the National Trust, specifically for spending on the mill. And the local general manager has managed to make sure that we have access to that legacy. It's controlled by him, basically, release of it, but for projects like this second water wheel project, money is released from that legacy.
We depend upon each other, I think, and but the mill, they do stand on their own 2 feet as well. So they're able to do their own fundraising, then they can spend that money in how they want to spend it.
How hard is it to be a successful, in quotes, milling business nowadays?
It's a fool's game who continues to do something, making or losing money. It's a dead end. As a miller myself, running my own business, yes, we do make some money. We don't make a lot of money, but we do make money to continue to cover the costs of maintaining the mill and a small amount to contribute into. Obviously, we pay the staff that we have. I employ 2 staff, and you know, I'm running a business. I also need to return myself. So it is possible, but it takes long hours. It also takes great care in terms of supply chain, both in terms of grain, all the things that go then into product and packaging, and to have multiple channels to market. You need to know how people work with your flour if you're going to successfully court the market out there that's buying, especially through mail order, because there's so much choice.
It's made a reasonable amount of money because we don't pay anybody. It's simple as that. If you can do it if you're all volunteers. You can't do it. Very difficult to do it if you're paying somebody.
No longer is it possible to rely on the fact that we're a mill attraction which is open to visitors, or even a mill attraction which is going to sell you bags of flour. It's a complex tourism market out there. It's different post-COVID. There are fewer people coming out on a Sunday afternoon for a scone, cup of tea, and a trip to a mill. And we therefore have to work smarter. We have to work through social media as a way of gaining access to these people, and then finding them something not only about looking at historic building, but also connecting with a number of interests and passions in people's lives.
How difficult do you find fundraising?
We're helped by the fact that we do have a good fundraising group, and it meets every 6 or so weeks, and it's a constant thing because although we do have a decent stream of revenue funding from hires of the building and workshops and things like that, we still rely quite substantially on grant aid for running specific projects and improvements.
But we've had some good news just in the last few weeks that we have got some funds to do that. So that's the first stage, and now there's much work to be gotten on with.
How important is the grant that you've got compared to your other sources of income?
I think obviously the amount is one of the biggest differences. We at the Trust have a small fundraising subcommittee that raises funds for things like staffing or events or projects. And that's the kind of thing that keeps us open on a yearly basis and lets us do some of the projects that we'd like to do. But in terms of the costings for the mill, that would have been a very big undertaking for our small group. And also, while the Trust run the site on a daily basis, the buildings are still owned by the council. So they sort of have the ownership and the wherewithal to apply for this grant.
What is the best way to sustain a mill?
I think that both sustaining and conserving rely on having a significant and enthusiastic group of volunteers, or if you're very lucky and have the resources, paid people to support, organize, and build a structure around your mill. Where those mills have a significant voluntary group that's well organized, enthusiastic, comes together, has a sense of community of its own, they tend to be more successful in my experience.
I'm Mildred Cookson, and I'm the chairman of the mill section, overseeing our committee and taking the initiative on planning and casework and repair of mills, which is so important. And we have a mill section philosophy of keeping mills traditional, using the right materials, and also keeping to regional variations of sales and caps and things like that. Very important that when someone buys a mill, they know how to go about looking after it. We still have a shortage of millwrights to do this work, but we've got 1 or 2 new ones, and the SBAB runs a fellowship program, of which again this year, for the 3rd year running, we have a millwright fellow. So he'll train for a year throughout this year, looking at various mills and working with millwrights, and then hopefully he will then continue working with a millwright to get more and more knowledge to be able to work on his own. So there's quite a few very important mills at the moment that are now up for sale, ones that have been working for many, many years, and we're just hoping that we can get a right owner for them. It'd be very sad if they had to close and didn't produce flour or open to the public anymore. So there's still a threat out there, but we're keeping an eye on everything like that. So,
but is it just the UK that is suffering? I wanted to find out how the Netherlands looks after their windmills.
I'm Nicole Bakker. I'm the director of the Hollandse Molen, which is an organization in the Netherlands who is doing a lot of work for all the traditional water and windmills here. Well, the Netherlands still have about 1,200 traditional mills, of which I think about 150 water-driven mills. And most of them are still functional, and that's the aim of the Hollandse Molen, to keep the traditional mills, functional. And in most parts we succeed in that, so that's great. Yeah, the mills are really an icon of the Netherlands. Well, you know, tulips, wooden shoes, and mills. I think everybody knows the Netherlands from that image. And so they really appreciate them, especially when they're turning and working. I must say that some people think that that's just happening by itself, that it's self-evident, but it cannot exist without the work and the hours and the effort of a lot of volunteers in our country.
Where does the money come from, and does central government provide any funding?
Yeah, the government provides funding for the regular maintenance. They fund up to 50 or 60%. And the provinces, they provide for the restoration funding from 40 to 70%, differs on the province, but only if you can find the co-financing. So the biggest challenge for owners is to find co-funding. We try to help with that as the Hollandse Molen. We have a fund of our own with a bit of money, so we can do something about the co-funding. But we also stimulate mills to do on crowdfunding to get money from the local public. And there are, of course, some other private funds to apply for money. But that's the biggest challenge, to find money for the mill, because there's not enough from the government. For example, we have some mills of our own.
How easy is it for a business to survive in 2024 with a mill?
Not easy, no. I think we have about 30-40 professional millers in the Netherlands, and they depend in whole or in part for their livelihood on running the mill. And I think there are only a few who are totally independent. Some of them are employed with the local government and get some money of that, and then work professionally in the mill. Others are get the money from the foundation. So it's a bit of this and a bit of that, but it's definitely not easy to keep a mill running professionally. And most of them, well, you have a mill, but sometimes also the restaurant next to it, or a room you can rent for meetings next to it. So it's the mill and something more to keep total budget enough to get your livelihood done. We really try to promote that the mills we have are a collection of 1,200 very specific, very beautiful mills, and every mill has something to tell. They're all different, and that's the fun thing about mills. And we try to realize that we get more we chart and to try to get more information about every mill, because what's really specific about that mill and the surrounding of that mill and the stories about that mill. And we try to make, we call it a mill passport, to get all those information in place. And then we really want that the public and the stakeholders know that this collection should remain as it is, and we should have enough funding to do so, and enough people to do so, and enough mill rights to do so. And that realization that the mill is more than stones and wood, huh? Mill is more than that. It's also all the intangible stuff around it, and the miller is placed on the list of UNESCO in 2017, which also says it's important to keep this craft of the miller alive, and also that you need working mills. And working mills means mills with access to wind or access to water, with enough people who run it and enough knowledge to do it the right way.
It's about engaging with people in a really constructive way if they're coming to visit, and leaving them with a great impression, which means they want to come back.
Best memory, it's probably when we had the sales turning for the first time since way back when.
You know, it's a joy to work here. It's a joy to work alongside incredible staff and volunteers and have such lovely visitors too. So it's a very special organisation.
The best bit, well, to work with them, to feel them, to smell them, to see them. And I work on 2 mills, and it's always great to be there. And well,
there's nothing better, I find, than a windy and sunny day at Greens Mill. So often, of course, when it's windy, the weather is usually not that great. I don't find very often that it's sunny and windy at the same time. And they're really the days of bringing lots of visitors as well, because the sun's out and it's really warm. But the mill is running, you know, we've got all the windows open, the doors open, you've got the smell of flour, you can see it, you know, the flour kicking out of the shoots. And people are coming in and they're just completely wowed by what's going on, and the production of flour and the sales turning and the sounds that are happening. So I think those days are the best days for me, and they're the days I feel really grateful to be here and really lucky that I've got the job I have.
And here at Nutley, they've got a new set of sails being put on today.
That's sweep 2, which is one of a pair of shuttered sweeps. That's about to be craned back on.
The 9th of November last year, we had one of the stocks snapped. So to make sure the mill was safe over the winter, we took all the other sails off. And today we're refitting the sails, ready for being able to show them off next year.
By the trees, we've got sweep 4.
Should just press them all out of the way.
Which goes on right at the end. That's the tricky one because we've got to crane it right up to the top. But I don't like heights.
I'm Raina Jones, I'm the mill manager here. So I think the mill is important to the people of Killin because it really represents the heritage of the area. Whenever I was walking down the street when the mill was closed and we were in the process of changing it from the thrift shop into something else, if I asked somebody what they'd like to see in the mill, they always said heritage. And so we're really trying to bring that back to the mill today. I think another reason that the mill is important is that it's right next to the Falls of Docker, which is in the top 10 most visited places in Scotland. So the footfall here is huge. And the mill is really well positioned to actually gather those people and to send them into the village and actually help improve the local economy. So within the mill we sell work of local artists. but we also try to direct people up the village to go and see other heritage things and to visit the shops and other businesses in the area.
I'm Sonia Linskill, I'm a conservation architect and I'm here today at the Old Mill in Cullen. It's quite unusual for me because I started here probably over 10 years ago doing a conservation plan to look at trying to find a viable use for the mill and also its condition. So it's great to be back here and to see that the mill is now open and being looked after by the local Community Development Trust, CAT. And it's really providing a great kind of focus for the village and the local community, and it really helps with the business and the supporting local artists in Cullen, but also it's helping with the tourist economy. The other thing is that, you know, what CAT have done here in saving this building is important in a kind of Scottish perspective because there's so few buildings and mill buildings which have working water infrastructure, and here in Cullen the water wheel is a replica but it's still working, the lathe was repaired, so when the mill's open the wheel is running and you can come and see that both inside and outside. And so if you're in Cullen it's definitely worth a visit, and I hope you can appreciate what's been done here. And I think it's also just thinking that, you know, for other groups out there who are in a similar position, you know, these things can take time. You know, sometimes things happen very fast and some things sometimes take a decade to happen. So it's just realising that, you know, you keep plugging away and the community support, then you'll get here. Thank you.
Chris, thanks so much for your time in talking to me. Why did you decide to become a volunteer at Lowfield Heath?
I moved back into the area 7 years ago. Previously been up in Cheshire where I owned and ran and managed a touring caravan park. I retired and moved back down here. Wanted to get involved in volunteering in some shape or form. Saw a little advert that the windmill had an open day. Thought I'll have a wander along there and said I'd like to get involved. In the early days it was to help maintain the grounds because they looked, I will admit, a bit rough and ready when we came because again lack of volunteers. So I came on board doing that to begin with. I just think it's a lovely setting here. I mean, it's peaceful most of the time with Gatwick even on the doorstep, but it's just nice coming over, cutting the grass once or twice a week. It's a bit of exercise. I don't need to go down the gym. That keeps me going.
How did you become a volunteer?
By default, because I grew up with this particular windmill. So basically I've just been involved in it from a very early age. Soon as I can walk around, I was up on the scaffolding, getting involved.
And what sort of appeals to you about working on a windmill?
It's something different, something completely different to anything else. So you're out here, first of all you're in the fresh air, which is nice, but you're out here meeting people and getting involved and opening something for everybody to enjoy basically. So it's nice just to be a part of that. So yeah, you get a lot of satisfaction out of just basically seeing people enjoy walking around the mill, appreciating what it is. At the end of the day, these aren't everywhere. You don't really see them around, even though there's quite a few preserved around, but you know, it's something a bit different for everybody to enjoy.
And you're sort of quite a young person, which, you know, not being rude, is quite an unusual thing to find at.
Yeah, I think it's important for all ages to be involved. You know, young guys come along, girls come along and get involved. It's great because obviously, you know, it keeps it going. You don't even have to be into windmills, if honest. You could just literally come down and enjoy the actual just being out in the open, you know, adding and contributing towards something that's for everybody to enjoy. So, you know, you don't even have to be into windmills to add to it. You could just literally just enjoy coming out and meeting people and getting involved.
What do you think the problem is in attracting volunteers?
I think it's time more than anything else. I mean, I got involved when I retired because I had the time, and knowing what the youngsters the pressure on their time these days. I think they struggle, to find the time.
What do you think can be done to sort of attract younger people to the mill?
That's a difficult one, isn't it? I think the main thing is always when we have our open days is to be as friendly as possible, to be as welcoming as possible, to be engaging as possible, and to explain what we're doing.
And what's been your favourite time here?
Probably when I was a lot younger. So probably when I was around here basically playing and watching my dad and the other volunteers just building it to what it is today. So, but today now I'm a bit more active, as in, I can do a lot more. From when I was, instead of being an early age, you can't obviously do as you're limited, but now I'm a lot more involved in it.
And what do you think the future holds for Lowfield Heath?
Hopefully forever. So hopefully it'll be here for many generations to come, and to keep it in its present form, its present state, and we can only do that through people who volunteer. So come down, and it's just simple things like paint a wall, or like we're doing today, just cleaning up, washing things down. Any contribution that anyone can make is going to make a difference to it.
And what's the best bit do you find about being a volunteer?
I think you get great satisfaction knowing you're keeping an old heritage building going. When I came on board, when it was first re-erected here from its original site, it was operational, I understand, but it isn't at the moment, and that's my ambition, is before I leave or decide I've had enough, is to actually get the sweeps turning with the wind and actually get the stones grinding and some flour. That's my target, I guess.
Thanks. Thank you very much for asking me to talk about the old mill here in Killin. We're absolutely thrilled with the current developments of the mill. I've seen it throughout my childhood and the years that I've been living and coming back to the village. I've seen it develop. So the mill, in my childhood, was a tweed mill, a tweed shop really, and we had the healing stones, and I remember coming with my mother and putting my knuckles on the healing stones to try and get them cured of warts. I no longer have my warts, so I'm attributing it completely to the healing stones here in the mill. So I'm part of the community, Killin and Arjona Community Development Trust. I'm one of the directors, and we now have responsibility for maintaining this iconic building. It is really a fantastic, a beautiful building. Anybody that comes into it can see that. It has needed work over the years, and I'm delighted to see that work has started. I mean, this room that I'm being filmed in just now is part of our heritage display. It houses our heritage display, and it is truly beautiful. With the Falls of Dochart right next door to us, which are another iconic feature of Killin. So we're seeing now the old mill coming to life from having been a shop in the 60s and 70s, and then it became a tourist information place, and then it became a thrift shop. We're now seeing it coming to life with the Makers Market and with the heritage display. So again, just absolutely thrilled and proud to be part of this development, and to see the building, the mill, really contributing to the village and to the attractions of this tourist iconic village. So please come and visit us up here whenever you can. I'm sure you'll all love it. Thank you very much. Bye.
Welcome to Oldland Windmill. There's been a windmill here near Kemah in West Sussex for over 300 years, but like most mills, it was abandoned early last century. Starting over 40 years ago, a group of volunteers restored this mill to a working state. So now, in 2024, maintaining a windmill like this so it's able to produce flour isn't without its challenges. So if it wasn't for the volunteers, whether in the milling, maintenance or any other team, this just would not be possible. So let's hear from some of those volunteers.
I got involved with this windmill because I live locally, and this is a footpath, and we walk up here quite regularly and admire the mill, and I think it's wonderful. And actually now I've got the opportunity to be involved with it. I think it's a really good thing to do, something that I admire and that I can actually contribute towards. So that's why I got involved. Plus I was hooked in by another volunteer who was quite persuasive. I've been volunteering since about last May, so nearly a year, but prior to that I had been a summer volunteer when they've been painting at the mill. Recently I have been asked if I wanted to be involved with the milling. Specifically on milling days, we need to wind the mill so that it's pointing in the correct direction. We need to judge the wind as well to set the shutters appropriately. Recently we've had a programme of replacing the how the shutters are actually held on to the sweeps, and in doing so it was discovered that something called the eccentric pulley was not sound. So this morning we've been looking at fitting a new piece. So I've been up in the cherry picker with Fred because you need two pairs of hands to do what we were doing, which was to ensure that the new piece of the eccentric pulley mechanism is actually the right shape and the right size. The holes are drilled in the right place for it to fit correctly. Coming up to the mill, I found that the tasks that I'm doing are varied and many. There's nothing specific that I am in charge of, because I have the opportunity to do all sorts of things that I'd never even thought that I would be able to do. I have been helping with using the pillar drill. I mean, I've never touched one in my life before. I've used the bandsaw, things that frighten me, frankly, but you know, it's under supervision. People are there to show you what to do and to help you do them and to learn more, and that's the whole point of coming up here, is to learn more and to be involved. And I've really enjoyed it. It's a very friendly place to come to as well. Yeah, couldn't ask for more, really and truly. Good chat, good banter, lovely to be involved.
I was specifically asked to join to help with the fundraising side, because Oldland had applied for a government grant in the late 1990s and they were unsuccessful. But they had appreciated by around the year 2000 just how expensive it was going to be to complete the restoration. Therefore, money was an important issue to consider. My experience from the academic world was applying for grants occasionally and being reasonably successful, so I felt I had a skill I could offer them, and that was welcomed, and so I came specifically in 2003 to basically see if we could get a government grant to help cover the costs of constructing replacement sweeps, which were clearly one of the key requirements of restoring the mill. My background at the University of Brighton, I entered the educational world having worked in industry, GEC, Marine and Nuclear Division, as a structural design engineer. I actually changed horses somewhat mid-career because I became fascinated with engineering design in the broadest sense, and the philosophical side of it, if you want to use that grand word. And I'd become interested in teaching, and I took the opportunity to become a lecturer initially in engineering design, and I introduced engineering design as a subject into mechanical engineering courses at the University of Brighton. It's that interest in design which really drove me through my academic career, by the end of which I had become the Dean of Faculty of Science and Engineering at the University of Brighton. So clearly once I got to that role I'd lost the day-to-day lecturing, which I rather missed, but that's another story. But at least I did have some experience of management, if you like, in those days of the order of perhaps 100 staff in the faculty. It was not foreign to me to try and lead a group of people on any sort of project, including something like Oldland Mill. That said, I want to make it quite clear I didn't come in and immediately adopt the most senior position. Far from it. I came in with a lot to learn because I did not claim to be an expert in historic buildings, for example. I understood mechanical structures, but I didn't necessarily understand traditional historic wooden buildings. Clearly one doesn't use much wood in modern nuclear power stations, which was my structural experience. And when I came in, of course, the leader was John Annett, the man who really is primarily responsible for the mill reaching the stage it has now. And I worked very much as John's second, if you like, second in command, really working with him and for him and learning from him. Very important to appreciate what we have to learn at any stage in our lives.
It started when I was about 5 years old. I went to West Watchington Windmill when I was 5, and I collected a stamp book. And this was basically where you'd go around to all the different windmills and you get a stamp and you'd get something called a Dusty Miller's badge at the end. It was actually called a Dusty Miller's passport, believe it or not. So I'd done that, and when I was about by the age of 10, I had already collected well over 20 stamps from just different mills. And I was quite drawn to ones which were working. You know, just going to a windmill and just seeing it actually working in the flesh, you just think it's just amazing. It's just amazing to see. And yeah, just being that sort of child, just standing, just watching it turn, and just thinking, oh, one day I'd love to be involved in something like that. Of course, children, you know, they lose interest in things, but it was just something for me that always sort of stuck. And as I got a bit older, I started to become involved, and then yeah, it just kind of went from strength to strength, really. I'm 20 now and I'm still really interested in windmills. For a number of years now, I've been on the milling team at Oldland, and we produce about 2.5 tons of flour a year to be sold at local outlets, and all the money from that goes back into the mill fund, and that's what's keeping it up and running for everybody to see, along with the open days and the fetes and a dedicated group of volunteers.
I visited Oldland Mill as a visitor on one of the open afternoons around about 2014. I'd been to the mill a few times before but taken little interest. This time I took a bit more interest, mainly because of my engineering background, and I was given a very detailed explanation of how it worked by one of the volunteers called Mick Fitter, who suggested perhaps I should come along as a volunteer to see if I could do anything useful at the mill in my retirement. So that's how it started. My current role at the mill is lead miller. That means I'm basically in charge of all the milling operations to produce our flour, for which we sell to the public. Part of that role is to select the wheat we buy, visit the farms to look at the quality, test it, and then arrange the purchase, collection and delivery to the mill. After which we then, within the milling team, run the grain through our winnower to make sure we remove all the bits that we don't want in the milling process. And after that we then bring the grain into the mill to store on the bin floor, where it stays safely wrapped up and protected from the environment until we're ready to use it for milling. I enjoy many things coming to the mill. The people, they're a friendly bunch, we have a good bit of banter, but we get on with the job of keeping the mill in the condition it needs to be kept in for our future generations to enjoy. So that's my main enjoyment, but of course the milling is important. I enjoy running the mill. It's a big machine and there's a lot of responsibility in running it. But the satisfaction in the end is producing the flour, seeing it packed up and sold to make the mill a bit of money to help keep it maintained.
And it's those involved with volunteering that keep our mills working. So let's get involved.
Let's get involved.
Adrian, thank you very much for your time in talking to me today about Chinner Windmill. Can you tell me when the first reference to Chinner was?
This mill, we believe, was built in 1789. There were mills in the village before that, but this is the records that we have for this. The particular mill, of course, was bulldozed in the 1960s, and what you're seeing now is a reconstruction based on the parts that we found and photographs taken as the thing fell down.
So effectively you and your fellow volunteers have built a post mill from scratch?
Yes, based on the photographs that we have, the available beams that survived. We had one of the corner posts, the original crown tree, and so there are various fixed points that we could build from, which defined exactly how big and tall it all was. There isn't a textbook on building windmills, so we had to discover a lot of these things ourselves.
Chinner is a post mill. It seems quite late to be building post mills, and certainly it seems to be quite late in its history when it was, as you might say, updated. Why do you think that happened?
I believe that mills were not designed to last particularly long, 20, 30 years or something, and just millers were very, very tight and kept them going for as long as they possibly could. I mean, there's certainly evidence in terms of what we ended up with at Chinner before it was knocked down, that there was an awful lot of remedial, keep it going, put extra bits of wood in, put some tie rods in, trying to keep the whole thing straight, stop it falling over. So I guess you use the resource as much as you possibly can until it becomes uneconomic.
And this is sort of a local mill really, because it's sort of a local design.
Yeah, the six-footed mills are in Chinner, Stokenchurch and Bredlow. There are, I think there's some others elsewhere in the country, but there's certainly a cluster in this particular area, so we think it's an affectation of the local millwright really.
So Adrian, we're underneath the mill now. And we can actually sort of see a bit more of the detail of the trestle, and you can finally see the main post there.
Yes, the main post is very old, very big. It's got some big cracks in, but actually once you get more than a quarter of an inch down, it's good solid wood still. The post itself is held by the quarter bars, is not resting on the main one across the bottom, which is why there's a gap there. The joints are then such that they can take a particular load in a particular direction, and then at the top we have a fairly complicated joint that nests in to allow the forces to be taken appropriately.
And what are these black timbers?
Okay, there's in order to stop the windmill rattling too much, there's a supporting ring underneath, a bit like you get on the top of a tower mill or indeed a smock mill. So it's a steadying bar, and that steadying bar is held on these supporting Y pieces, we call them, and then there are rollers on the underside of the windmill which run along them and hopefully stop the rattling too much. More rollers at the front of the mill because this mill is rather head heavy.
So the sun's come out and we're able to talk about the fantail. Now, what is the role of a fantail in a post mill?
Okay, well, in a post mill, the whole mill has to turn to point into the wind, and it used to be done by pushing it round by hand. About the turn of 1900s, they fitted a fantail, which is an automatic system which automatically keeps the mill pointing in the right directions, meaning that the miller doesn't have to keep pushing it round. So the system is you have a fan at the top, and if that ever receives any side wind, it turns, which winds some gears, which then run the wheels, so the thing just moves until the fan is again in the shadow.
And you've got a joint in your hand, I see.
Yeah, I mean, most joints are designed, most carpentry joints are designed to push. They're not particularly good intention unless it's a thing called a dovetail. But in order to have a fantail and hold that vertically, there are beams that have to be in tension and in compression, so it has to push and pull. And that's when you need really rather special joints. So what I have in my hand is the preparation we did for making the real ones of the top joint, where the diagonals meet at the top there. It consists of a hidden angled dovetail joint, which enables us to push and pull to take forces that are compression and in tension. So it works.
And has it been an enjoyable journey?
Yes. I mean, you sometimes look at the list of things we've got to do in order to finally grind grain, and you think that's a mountain. But then you look at what we have actually achieved in terms of everything here. Not me, but me and the team. And I've just ended up being the most senior person in the team because other people have moved on and stuff. But yes, it's very much a team thing.
And what is the future for Chin Mill? Are you going to restore it back to grinding order?
My plan for the mill is to make 2 bread rolls, one brown and one white. So we'll use the milling and the sieving. We've just built our own flour dresser. So when we've done that, I feel I will have done my bit. I can pass it on to the next generation.
So that's it for this year's National Mills Weekend 2024. And I'd like to thank everyone who so generously has given their time to make this year's film such a success. And remember, keep milling.